Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I am the Diggity Doodah Doc. As always, I am joined by the wobbly wild card. Today, we are here to talk about Plunket Shield cricket and the Kiwi summer of cricket in the domestic format primarily. Yesterday, we recorded Steven Adams and a little update on our favourite Kiwi basketball player ever, Mr. Steven Adams. So if you're listening to this and you like Steven Adams, go check that out. And of course, the Niche Cache is on Patreon. The best way to support the Niche Cache is on Patreon. We try our best to hook up our patrons who support us, and we endeavour to make it a beautiful VIP little area for our Niche Cache supporters. So jump over there if you do like the Niche Cache, if you do like what we're doing in some capacity. Again, the best way to support the Niche Cache at the moment is jumping on Patreon and helping us do what we love to do, and hopefully what you enjoy us doing as well. Wildcard. We are here to talk about Plunket Shield cricket, but yesterday, I believe, the old guy, Logic, rapper, creative kind of guy, he's written a book. And he released a soundtrack to that book. And it was very interesting because I was just listening to the soundtrack, and the music was very different to, perhaps not very different, but had a different kind of tinge. And I was like, that's a great way to kind of take a few different angles to how you want to present your music if you can write a book first and foremost, like a novel. But then if you can serve up a soundtrack for a novel is a ridiculous idea in itself, because it's a lot different to a soundtrack to a movie. So first of all, how the fuck are you? And second of all, any thoughts on Logic releasing a soundtrack for his novel that he has written himself?
Yeah, bloody great, Doc. So he's written a novel, like not just like a book, but a straight up like novel, like a fictional extended narrative. Have I got this right?
Roger that.
Oh, well, good on him. I mean, I'm probably less interested in the music than I am in the book then, if that's the case, because, you know, I've heard my share of Logic albums in the past. Old Mr. Bobby Tarantino, you know, and he's done some interesting stuff, and he's done some enjoyable stuff. If I'm honest, he's not a dude who I go back to a whole lot. I don't find his albums hold up like under repeated listens as often, but he's always got an interesting like conceptual theme to what he does. So I guess it doesn't really surprise me that he's gone all out and just like straight up written a book. But I don't know. I tell you what, I'm kind of curious to read the book now. What do you have, like a plot synopsis or whatever, or like is there anything funky going on with that thing, other than the fact that there's a soundtrack for it?
I have zero plot synopsis, but
Well, I tell you what, that's often the best way to read a book without knowing anything going into it.
I would hazard a guess that there's some sort of space element involved.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, there often is with him.
One of his albums, it might have been his second album, was a huge like conceptual album. I can't remember the Incredible True Story or something like that, where they left planet Earth and they went on a into a spaceship and out into space, and it's like interwoven with like his musical tracks that are somewhat relatable to the story, but also hold up by themselves. And if you can present an album that genuinely feels like a story, but you kind of get these albums that are like that, present like a story in a very real sense. Like my life was, I was down in the dumps. I was fantastic at the start, then I was down in the dumps during the middle of the album, then, you know, the resurgent at the end of the album. But there's less of the albums where, like Logic's that Incredible True Story, where it's a genuine, like, just weird concept that actually feels more like a novel, like a
like a radio play almost.
Yeah, like everything aside from the music is a story into itself, and then you've got the music adding and enhancing the general vibe, general story.
Yeah, I think that's the way that I have preferred Logic working in the past. Like when he's when the music is serving the like a cohesive theme or narrative sort of thing, rather than when he's just out there trying to write bangers which don't necessarily quite work. It's not really his game. Yeah, might have to check that one out then, Doc. I might have to check that one out. Specifically the book.
Good Kid, Mad City was a bit like that for me as well.
It was, It was that one. It was definitely maybe not as much of a like straight narrative, but definitely a thematic thing, like a place and time, and even Vince Staples' first album had a similar vibe, sort of like set in a time in his past and capturing a moment, not necessarily an evolving narrative, but a moment in time.
What, the old Summertime '06 one?
Summertime '06.
Yeah.
Set in the summertime of '06.
One would believe, Wildcard. Now,
Well, one has been led to believe anyway.
we had some Plunket Shield cricket over the summer. It was my overall kind of vibe from the domestic summer was the same kind of as the Super Smash, where New Zealand cricket has worked their schedule where none of it flows. It's all very stop-starty. I think we had 2 less Plunket Shield games this season than we usually do. Only 8 games compared to the 10 of previous seasons. You've got different formats all over the place. It is kind of lumped together, which is nice, but even just the flow of games, like during the Super Smash, there wasn't a consistent flow of games. You'd have a couple of games, then you'd have like a week off. And then you'd have a couple of games, and then you'd have a week off. And it's like, we've been pretty critical of New Zealand cricket and such matters before. But that comes from a place of like, just how they don't understand to best like present a product, to produce a product. Like an album with a narrative and something to draw you in along with the music. An album is presented, a good album, a masterpiece, is presented in a way that enhances what the nitty-gritty is, and that's the music. What it feels like is that New Zealand cricket doesn't quite understand how to best present cricket to the Kiwi public, domestic cricket anyway, with just a common sense like format. Like, to generate buzz, to generate hype around the Super Smash, you need games every night, every second night, and they need to be visible. They need to be, the public needs to know what's happening, and they need to be just constantly turning to the Super Smash. Whereas at the moment it's like, oh, there's a bit of Super Smash on tonight, but we don't know like when the next game is. Oh, the last time this team played was like a week ago, and shit, none of the same guys are playing now because there's Black Caps cricket, or there's like ins and outs and all sorts. So it was just a very hodgy-podgy, studgy kind of summer of domestic cricket from my perspective.
Yeah, well, it's often seems to be like that with a lot of these. I mean, I've had discussions with people about the Premiership football recently, and it's a similar thing where people are just like, the format of that it's okay, but like, for one thing, it's marketed really poorly by New Zealand football. They do their bit, but they do their bit within the realms of what they should already be doing. They're not going above and beyond to reach new people and to spark up a hype beyond like just the absolute diehards who might go anyway. And the fact that at the end of the season there, you've got this thing where 2 teams are going off to play Champions League, and there's like 2 split rounds, and everyone's got buys, and it just loses momentum at the wrong time, and by then the teams that are out of it don't care anymore. The Plunket Shield at least got split nicely in half, didn't it? You got a little bit at the start and a little bit at the end, and it got a little clunky in the middle there with some of that shorter form stuff, but at least the Plunket Shield held its own, albeit with 2 less rounds. Yeah, by the way, I was just thinking when you're talking about keeping a cohesive narrative and sort of thing, you reminded me my favorite one of those kinds of albums with like a narrative, proper like concept album, not just a thematic concept album, but like a narrative concept album. Old mate, Willie Nelson, Red-Headed Stranger. That one goes good, mate, I'll tell you that. They really missed the boat when Willie Nelson didn't run for president, or else the world would have been a much happier place. So where do we want to start with Plunket Shield then, if we dive into the good stuff, the stuff that mattered? We start with some of them top performers, Doc?
Well, I just want to touch base on because you mentioned the Premiership, and it's...
Yep, far away.
Overall, in general, like, domestic sport in New Zealand is in a weird place, because a lot of sports in New Zealand, there's no foundations to like have a professional setup for pretty much any sport other than rugby in New Zealand. Domestic sport in New Zealand is in a really kind of shitty spot because we've got fantastic athletes given the situation, but there's no great growth opportunities for those athletes to get better as athletes because they are not competing in professional environments. And that's kind of sad, like, as we'd expect, the best Kiwi athletes have to go overseas, but you would just hope that New Zealand had an ecosystem where you could be a professional athlete for, 5 to 10 years if you're good enough. Like, that would just be a nice thing for New Zealand to have and provide that for the best athletes that we have in New Zealand. But a lot of that, for me, like, people kind of take the cop-out option. They say New Zealand's just too small, or they place their own limitation, they place their own restriction on it, instead of all these organizations in New Zealand. Like, no organization is free of criticism because they're all the same. They're so mundane. They have no creativity. They have no common sense. They have no even, outside the box kind of common sense. Like, how can we present this product in a way that allows our athletes to be professional for that period of time? Everyone's trying to play up to Sky TV. Everyone's trying to copy how other countries work. No sporting organization has really gone all in on doing their very best job to present a product that best represents that sport, because to my mind, all the sporting organizations in New Zealand fail at that. Like, you can look at any kind of national domestic competition, given the scale of the international team or our national team competing on the international stage, which is very good. New Zealand is the best sporting nation in the world given our size, kg for kg. So we perform on the international level. But then in a domestic national level, it's an absolute shit show. There's nothing being done to really push the boundaries and challenge the status quo in terms of how to present a national domestic competition. And again, that goes for all sporting competitions, Wildcard.
Yeah, including rugby, because the reason rugby goes so well is because it's got that massive, complacent middle New Zealand support, and it's always going to have that. But if any other organisation was running their major competition the way that New Zealand Rugby had been running the, what used to be called the NPC, I mean, they've just constantly tinkering with the format and changing things, and no, we're going to have promotion relegation now, but we're going to have teams from First Division playing Second Division all over. Like, they've treated that, which is easily my favourite rugby to watch. It's not even close. I prefer that to watching the All Blacks. I mean, I'd still watch the All Blacks, but I prefer a bit of Northern versus Counties if I can. They've treated that like a, I don't even know what the right metaphor would be, Doc. They've treated it like crap, basically, and any other organisation wouldn't be getting away with that. That rugby is so complacent itself. They've they can do whatever they want. They're always going to have a bit of support. And other sports sort of like, what they always do is they always bring up the financial thing. Like, we can't afford it. It's like, well, find a way to do it cheaper, or find a way to afford it. I don't know. I hate like brand integration and all that sneaky like commercial capitalism culture of the current era, but if that's what it takes, it's what you got to do. So find a way. At least New Zealand football have got that thing with the ISPS Hunter Trust or whatever they're called, who seem to be paying for a lot of that competition and getting naming rights for it and allowing us to have a national league, which is nice. I don't know what Plunket are doing with the Plunket Shield, because it's just such a sort of iconic name at this point. It wasn't always the Plunket Shield, but at this point it sort of feels like it has been. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but it's also not my job to figure that out.
Yeah, I just want to say to all these sporting organisations in New Zealand, you're trash. You are trash, and you're letting down New Zealand sport. And if you're listening to this, know that these organisations are trash, and we are the only ones out here highlighting how restrictive these organisations are being to their own growth, their own potential, and how they present their sports. Wildcard, Plunket Shield, cricket, which is not at all commercially viable because they don't stream it, because they don't have any sponsors, they don't draw any crowds, they don't present the Plunket Shield like an entertaining product. Barely anyone knows that the Plunket Shield exists because New Zealand cricket are kinda trash.
They don't even try to present it, though, is the thing. Like, it's
not at all.
When I went to that game at Cobham Oval, I can tell you I was there the first day I went on the afternoon of day one was the time I was there the longest for. There were a maximum of I'll say 15 people there, like in total, not even at one time, maximum of 15 people there in the crowd who were there to watch. It was free entry. It was a beautiful summer's afternoon. And there were multiple Black Caps playing as well. Martin Guptill scored 100 that day. I got there and saw the end of that. Ish Sodhi and Mitchell Santner were both bowling. It's like this. Why is no one here? Like, after school, there's half the. Why wasn't there like 30 kids at least just popping over off the school bus and having to watch for a couple hours before going home for dinner? It's just strange. Like, no one knew it was on.
No marketing, no exposure, no resource put into it, and don't even get me started on women's cricket wildcard. Let's just go straight into
times
some.
100.
Hit me with some names, and we'll talk through the narrative. I personally want to steer clear of stats because for me, not only do I refer to stats a lot in the written format, so I'll just be regurgitating that, but for the people listening, it's a lot more interesting, I believe, to know about the story and the context of that specific player and how they sit in the Kiwi domestic landscape, because there are a few interesting blokes around. So you can refer to stats, you can refer to whatever you like, because it's we live in a beautiful free land despite these trash sporting organisations. But for me, I'm going to discuss how they sit in the domestic circuit and whether that flows into any Black Caps conversations at all as well.
Well, we should talk about a fair bit of the old Central Districts fellas after their, title-winning campaign, but I believe the best place to start would be with Mr. Devon Conway, top run scorer, averaged 82 over the season, couple hundreds in there. I believe he is eligible, I heard this the other day, I believe he's eligible for the Black Caps in 2021, I think, so it might be 2 years. It might be next year, but I think it's in 2021 before he's eligible. Like, spin me some yarns on Devon Conway.
I found this out when I was writing the wrap-up of the top three batsmen. He won the Best Batsman award for the Highveld Lions, which is Gauteng in South Africa. He won the Best Batsman award 4 years in a row before coming to New Zealand. And he wasn't amazing last summer. he was very good, and you could see that there was like an adjustment period. But this summer he's won the national kind of best domestic batsman award, or maybe even the best domestic player, I'm not sure, but he's leading run scorer, and before coming to New Zealand he was averaging over 40 in first class cricket in South Africa. So if you're doing that over in South Africa, you're probably going to score a shitload of runs here in New Zealand as well. Wellington batsman, the interesting thing that I believe led to Conway kind of hitting that neck level was that last summer he was dabbling in a bit of wicket-keeping duties, kind of sharing the duties with Tom Blundell. And this summer, Wellington only had him batting number 3 as just a batsman. And Blundell didn't play a whole lot of domestic cricket. I'm struggling to think who the Wellington wicketkeeper was otherwise. But Devon Conway was just he was just batting number 3, stock standard, every game in the Plunket Shield, and that just led to a almighty flow of runs. And on top of that, he was the leading Super Smash run scorer and 5th, I believe, in Ford Trophy runs. So he's got the game to do it across all formats, and that is the purest kind of signal of a quality player, is that they can score runs in all 3 formats, especially in domestic cricket, because if you can't do it at domestic level, you're sure as hell not going to do it at an international level. Will be interesting to see how he progresses and whether he can wiggle his way into the Black Caps, because as we know, wildcard, the Black Caps batting, there's no real reason to, if Conway was eligible right now with the exact same record that he has, you can't really say Devon Conway should be in the Black Caps for who. It's a matter of when the opportunity comes, and by the time he's eligible, there might be a few more opportunities, whether that's a case of Ross Taylor retiring, or whether it's a case of the Black Caps playing more international cricket overseas, and thus those crazy awesome statistics that we see, my kind of prediction is that they will level out as the Black Caps play more international cricket overseas, and that might see a normal, a kind of evening out period, a sifting process. Whereas at the moment everything's honkadory because they're only playing in New Zealand, really, especially the Test team. But once they go overseas, they play more cricket overseas, a few weaknesses might be exposed, a few players might be exposed, and by that time Devon Conway may be eligible, and then he might slide into some Black Caps contention.
It's funny how that story goes, where the Black Caps play overseas and lose, and then people think that they're terrible, and then they come home, play a whole bunch of games against Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Pakistan, win a bunch of them, and then, it's Black Caps are suddenly amazing and incredible again. And the reality is that they're a very good cricket team, but they're somewhere in between those two things, because you do have to do it consistently away from home against better teams. And a nice Test series win against Pakistan was a very good start, but it'll be pretty handy if they can, back that up. And I think they go to Sri Lanka later on this year, and then obviously Australia after that. I mean, if they can win some games away against those two oppositions, then they're in a pretty good place. Best not get ahead of ourselves, though. One fella who was keeping pretty good track with Devon Conway, about the only person really, and he scored buckets of runs over the second half of the season, was Glenn Phillips, who in one less game than Conway scored 49 fewer runs. He had 610 and an average of 76.25 with 105 50s, so he passed 56 times out of his 10 innings. Tell me about Glenn Phillips a little bit, because I think what's quite striking about how well he did was he did it at a strike rate of just a cheeky 60, and I watched him on that day. I went to see Northern were playing Auckland at Colton Oval, and he had a pretty big partnership with a couple guys towards the end of that day, just batting through and getting Auckland through to a nice little score. They lost a couple of wickets around him right at the end, which didn't help. But he batted really patiently. He didn't score a lot of runs initially. He just really sort of blunted that ball, worked his way through that Northern District spinning attack, and just looked calm and composed. And then he picked up his run rate later on in the innings. So I mean, for a guy who got his start in 2020s, for the Black Caps anyway, for a guy who was talked up as he came through the ranks as the next Brendan McCullum, would I be right anyway in saying that he showed a lot of sort of like batting maturity this season?
Yeah, but that strike rate is still among, you can double check this, I think, is still among the best strike rates of like batsmen with over 500 runs. Or,
oh yeah, comfortably.
Yeah, so he's still. The thing about Glenn Phillips is he can hit boundaries that no other batsman can really hit. Like, he hits these really awkward shots, and instead of hitting these awkward shots for a 2 or a 3, Glenn Phillips hits them to the boundary. So he still can access boundaries. He can still score at a better strike rate than other batsmen. But for Glenn Phillips to be among the top 3 run scorers, so shout out Greg Hay as well, who was second, Central District's batsman, Glenn Phillips is there with a guy who came to New Zealand with 4 Batsman of the Year awards already, a first class average over 40, and Greg Hay, who is pretty much the best long format batsman in Aotearoa, who is not in the test team. Glenn Phillips is there. He's there with those players, and he's there batting as a 4-day batsman. Like, he's just doing the job as a 4-day batsman for Auckland. Interestingly, similar to Conway, there were some games when Glenn Phillips was the wicketkeeper. I'm not sure if he was the wicketkeeper in the game that you saw.
No, he wasn't.
He may have.
Ben Horn was.
Yeah, Ben Horn. So you've got, like Conway, you've got someone who can keep wicket, but someone who is probably more valuable to your team just as a batsman, where they can focus on their batting role. And I believe Glenn Phillips batted like number 3 or 4 more often than not for the Auckland Aces, and he's part of a very young batting lineup. Like, you got guys like Sean Solier, Mark Chapman, who wasn't quite as good this season as he had been. Ben Horn's in there as well. Very young bowling attack. Jamie Brown, Ben Lister, Dunru Ferns, guys like that. So for Glenn Phillips to stand up and say, I'm the best batsman in this Auckland Aces team, I'm going to be the leading run scorer for Auckland, I'm going to be one of 3 batsmen to score over 600 runs, and the other guys are just first-class monsters. This is a low-key huge summer for Glenn Phillips, given that he has been pigeonholed as not even as an ODI white ball cricketer, but as a T20 cricketer. Everyone has Glenn Phillips as batting one way, and for a young batsman to come out and showcase that he has the talents and the skills to perform in the Plunket Shield arena, nice work, Glenn Phillips.
We got a couple other interesting names along the top batting list. Guys like, Hamish Rutherford scored some runs. Where are we? Quite a few. I'm not going to go through them all. That'd be silly. But I figure we should probably, as I hinted at earlier, we should probably spare a thought for Central Districts, the champions. Chuck down a couple of them best performance. Greg Hay is obviously one as the top scorer for the champions. Had the highest individual score of the season as well, I believe, is 226. Locking down that top of the order for Central. But who else have we got on that list? Ajaz Patel got a few wickets, I understand.
Well, Central Districts just have the best team, like, easily. They just have the best group of cricketers in New Zealand, by quite some margin as well, considering that your bowling attack for some Plunket Shield games may be Doug Bracewell, Seth Rance. Ryan McCone was kind of the surprise package, given that he's not quite of the calibre as the rest of the bowlers, but he may have been the best Central District bowler of the summer, like competitive
He got the
with
most
Seth.
wickets.
Yeah, I think Doug Bracewell and Seth Rance were averaging in the very low 20s as well. And you got Blair Tickner, you got Ben Wheeler, you got so much talent in the bowling attack, Ajaz Patel, and then Tom Bruce, Dane Cleaver, Will Young when he's playing, Greg Hay. There's no shortage of talent in that Central District Stags lineup. And they've actually got a bit of depth as well. So that's like their top tier. And then you've got, Dean Foxcroft is another youngster who is probably in the tier below. But you've got guys like Dean Foxcroft and Willem Luddick, who are also from South Africa, who have recently come to New Zealand. They were in the same South African under-19 team. They are very good cricketers themselves, and they will establish themselves in the first 11 for the Stags within the next 2 summers. Foxcroft had like a breakout summer this summer, and Willem Luddick had a few moments. You got guys like Josh Clarkson, Christian Leopard. There's a spinner there as well, whose name I can't remember right off the top of my dome. Felix Murray is his name. You've got a very good group of cricketers at Central Districts, along with like Ben Smith as well, batsman. The one name who I will throw up as the most interesting is Dane Cleaver, because Dane Cleaver never, ever, ever gets a mention among New Zealand's best wicketkeeper batsmen. But his domestic record, I believe off the top of my head, he averages over 40 in first-class cricket. And he showed in glimpses this season that he could smash it in the shorter formats, but he's also a fantastic all-round batsman and cousin of Kane Williamson, Cricinfo always tells me. Dane Cleaver never gets a mention among the best wicketkeeper batsmen in New Zealand, and granted, he might be a bit below the Tom Blundell, Tim Seifert kind of level, but he's not that far below. Like, he is there or thereabouts based purely on his domestic record.
Yeah, pretty fascinating seam bowling attack there for Central Districts. That's bloody stacked. McCone getting 24 wickets, Rance got 22, Bracewell 22. Every single one of them had an average under 24. I mean, they didn't actually have Ajaz Patel for a lot of the season, the fellow who normally just takes bulks and bulks of wickets, because, of course, the start of the year he was away with the Black Caps and missed out on some cricket there, some domestic cricket anyway. Probably a fair trade, I think everyone would say. But they're just nipping them away with the pace bowlers the entire way through. It's bloody impressive. Everyone talks about Northern Districts and their sort of Paris Saint-Germain impersonation of just signing all the Black Caps, and apparently everyone just wants to live in Mount Maunganui these days, which, having been to Mount Maunganui a couple times, fair enough, completely understandable, beautiful place. But the thing with the Northern Districts, superior supposedly squad, is that they never play domestic cricket. Like, even Super Smash, they weren't getting these guys a whole lot of the way. These guys are just always away with Black Caps, or some of them are away with IPL. It's guys who just aren't gonna be contributing to a Plunket Shield campaign, and it's always a bit disruptive, even when you're bringing Black Caps back, to be chopping and chasing lineups for like one-off games when so-and-so's been told to go get some overs under their belt or whatever, or get a couple innings against domestic bowlers. And it's just, it's a bit misleading, isn't it? And what you saw instead is that Central Districts, who just are stacked for guys directly underneath that Black Caps level, that's the team that saw the benefit of all that, and then cruised to I believe that was their second championship in a row, am I right?
I believe so, and I actually also believe that I wrote prior to the season about this exact topic, that Central Districts have the best group of cricketers because they have the best group of cricketers who are going to play cricket.
Yeah, exactly.
So everyone loves to talk about Northern Districts. Everyone loves to live in this fantasy land where they put together Northern Districts' best first 11, which the mainstream media always does every summer. They put together their best first 11 for Northern Districts and, what could happen, what might happen. No, Central Districts roll out the best group of cricketers every week in the various formats. Of course, that doesn't mean they're going to win every game, but domestic cricket isn't about having the most black caps. It's about having the most that tier below black caps, that I would just say the best cricketers, and just having the best domestic cricketers, because you're only good if you're available. So Trent Boult is lovely, but he barely plays for Northern Districts, so he's not contributing to Northern Districts. Yeah, it's great for Northern Districts to sign Neil Wagner and Colin de Grandhomme, but there's not a whole lot of value for Northern Districts. So everyone was trumpeting those signings as fantastic for Northern Districts. Nice. Yeah, there might be cultural ramifications, it's good to have more black caps in your mix, good for the younger players, good for your culture, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of helping you win a Plunket Shield trophy, there's no point having Colin de Grandhomme if he's not playing. He's only as good as his availability. And this Central Districts team, they might not have the black cap, the premier black caps of black cap land, but they have the best domestic cricketers who show up and play domestic cricket pretty much every game. And I love Doug Bracewell, so I was very happy to see Doug Bracewell finish with a bowling average around 21 this summer as well.
And I love Will Young, so I'm fingers crossed that he gets that test debut sooner rather than later. Although it will be later, won't it? Because I don't think we play another test for about 6 months. One fella who did play a lot, a guy who's been in and out of the Black Caps, played a lot for Northern Districts this season, was Ish Sodhi. He played 7 of those 8 games. Took 36 wickets, top wicket taker in the Plunket Shield this season. What do you reckon of him?
Well, there's nothing really new about this. Every time Ish Sodhi has come back to Plunket Shield cricket, he's performed. At various stages of the summer during his Plunket Shield campaign, I highlighted his previous season's work in the Plunket Shield, and the dude is consistently averaging below 30 as a leg spinner, if not below 25, if not below 20, and among the leading wicket takers in New Zealand. And he just always there's nothing more you can really want from Ish Sodhi in domestic cricket, because every time he goes back to play Plunket Shield cricket, he dominates. He just absolutely dominates. The thing about Ajaz Patel, as we've highlighted a few times during his 3 seasons of 40 plus wickets, which is a monumental achievement, it's built on patience, it's built on kind of grit and grind and consistency and bowling a lot of overs and building pressure and kind of sustaining the batsman with some skill, with some guile as well, which is neither better or worse, but you compare it to Ish Sodhi, who comes in and blows away teams. So it's just a very different method of madness, and that's what Ish Sodhi does. He's got X Factor, and when you bring that X Factor back into Plunket Shield, that's what you get.
Yeah, the one thing I loved the most from his season of performances was that he bowled so many overs. He got through 314.4 overs in 7 games, so I can't really do the math off the top of my head, but I'm guessing that's somewhere around 7 times 4 is 228, so somewhere around 45 overs a game in those games he was playing. For a guy who just has played a lot of short form cricket, and a guy who has had his sort of domestic kind of, the normal path is that you come into the domestic cricket, you dominate a little bit there. Well, maybe you play some age grade cricket before that for New Zealand, which Ish Sodhi did. Come in, play a couple of seasons of Plunket Shield, some Super Smash, some Ford Trophy, take a bunch of wickets, impress everyone, and then work your way in after a couple of years of that. I think he almost got picked too early for the Black Caps, and because of that, he hasn't had that many just like sustained periods where you can just bowl over after over after over, really get into the groove and figure things out, find that rhythm. And he did a lot of that this year. He bowled heaps and heaps and heaps of overs, and I think that's going to be pretty beneficial for a fella like that.
You could make a comparison to Glenn Phillips. I don't think it's a straight up and down comparison, because Ish Sodhi has performed in Plunket Shield cricket for a longer time than Glenn Phillips, but there's like a easy, lazy thought process about Ish Sodhi, that he's a T20 white ball bowler, and he's also not very fit. He can't, bowl good long spells of overs in Test cricket. He bowls a couple of bad balls every over, blah blah blah. But Ish Sodhi gets wickets, and as you said, he bowled a lot of overs this summer in Plunket Shield cricket. So whether it's Glenn Phillips, whether it's Ish Sodhi, you've got to release these notions of your own restrictions that you place on these cricketers, because perhaps away from the cameras and the TV and how the casual fan gains access to watching those games at the higher levels, at the lower level, they can perform in any kind of circumstance, and their talent shines in any circumstance, and that's what's most important. But when they get to the higher levels, there are restrictions placed on them by selectors that I find really, really dumb and really silly, and they are not put in the best positions to succeed either, which holds them back. Like, imagine if Ish Sodhi was just told, you're going to be the test spinner, or you're going to be the ODI spinner, or whatever, you're going to be that spinner, and we're going to give you all summer to lead into the World Cup. That would be fantastic. And that doesn't just apply to Ish Sodhi, that applies to any other spinner. But the thing is that in the Black Caps, you don't have that consistency of selection, and so the players don't get the repetitions at the highest level to then figure out how they execute their skills and how they approach different scenarios against the world's best batsmen. Because you might bowl 10 overs in an ODI here, and then you're dropped, and then suddenly, instead of thinking, I'm working on my craft, I'm developing my craft, I'm becoming a better bowler, the next opportunity you get, you're thinking, shit, I better do well here, better take a few wickets here, how can I just, ensure that I get another opportunity, I better take this opportunity. That sort of faith and that sort of setting the players up for success is not evident in the Black Caps selection process.
So I've been putting together a couple of these little supercuts of all the wickets using the video scorecards that New Zealand Cricket does, which are always a very healthy and grateful resource. And Ish Sodhi was the first one I did as the leading wicket taker, and there's some beautiful looking wickets in there. I think what stuck out the most watching all of his wickets back to back is how good some of the catching was from Northern Districts, especially guys like Dean Brownlee took about 2 or 3 absolute stunners in that little highlights package. But the one that was even more fun was Hamish Bennett, and Hamish Bennett was second in total wickets, 32 wickets at an average of 17.87. This is just Hamish Bennett doing the same thing as he was doing for Wellington last year, just taking obscene amounts of wickets at a ridiculously small average. And I suppose his time with the Black Caps has probably been and gone, and injuries played a big part in that. But he is like an absolute champion of domestic cricket these days, and watching his wickets through, nobody celebrates a wicket harder than Hamish Bennett with the old double fist pump, and then some of the shattered stumps that he left in his wake. That was a very enjoyable task on my behalf there, putting together some of those things. And old Hamish Bennett, eh? What do you reckon?
I'd also shout out Daryl Mitchell for the Northern District Knights. His catching off Ish Sodhi was...
Yes, correct.
I think he fields that slip for Ish Sodhi for the Knights, so he took a few great snares as well. Hamish Bennett, there's not a whole lot to say about Hamish Bennett. Like, he is the best domestic performer, batsman or bowler. Like, he is ahead of Greg Hay because Hamish Bennett has a longer resume. He's got a longer list of consistency, whereas Greg Hay has kind of been solid and then really stepped up a gear in the last 2 seasons. So that's Hamish Bennett. He's just the best domestic cricketer, batsman or bowler, because he just dominates, and he's dominated over a long period of time now. And it doesn't really look like when you're watching the video scorecards, it doesn't really look like he's bowling that fast. I think it's decent pace with that old heavy ball, and because of that front-on action, that in-swing to the right-hander, which can very, 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 very similar to another player who is restricted by limiting beliefs and a limited perception of him, Lockie Ferguson, who absolutely rips up Plunket Shield cricket when he plays Plunket Shield cricket. He consistently just destroys batsmen in Plunket Shield cricket, and his best, again off the top of my head, his best format of his career is Plunket Shield cricket. So that's international ODI, T20 and domestic T20, domestic ODI and Plunket Shield, first class cricket. I think his best format is first class cricket. And he obviously, I think he bowls a lot faster than Hamish Bennett, but the point is that Lockie Ferguson does that in Plunket Shield cricket through moving the ball into right-handers at a nice pace. And it's very similar to what Hamish Bennett does, and I just think maybe that's a factor that just something different for the domestic batsman to figure out. The same with Ish Sodhi. Like, there's no bowler like Ish Sodhi in the world, let alone in New Zealand, because of his stature, because of his height, because of the angle he bowls with, because of what he bowls, leg spin, wrong-ins, everything. So these bowlers all have something in common in the sense that they produce something kind of unique that the batsmen, especially these domestic batsmen, can't deal with because they haven't really seen it before. If you're a domestic batsman, you've seen the right arm medium pacer who swings it out from the right hander. You've seen it all before. You've seen the off spinner. You know how to deal with that. But you don't know how to deal with Hamish Bennett steaming in, moving the ball into your body as a right-hander, or if you're a left-hander, moving the ball away from your edge, which is just as tricky as getting the ball coming in at your body or coming in at your stumps. And so it's just an interesting thought there about Hamish Bennett.
We've gone pretty well over time here, so I've just chuck out one more name. A couple weeks ago, we did a podcast talking about the Black Caps, and I remember suggesting that that Mr. William Somerville, I checked out an over-under of 0.5 deliveries in the remainder of his Test career from this point onwards, and I took the under on that one. To be fair to him, though, he and also to be fair to him, that was never a criticism of his abilities, more just the state of the New Zealand spin bowling situation these days in Test matches. But he played 7 games over the season. He played a good chunk towards the end of the season as well, and took decent wickets, 25 at 25.96. He chipped away, did Will Somerville. Bowled a lot of overs as well. Another one of those spinners who got through like just big bulk sessions and got himself to where he was 1, 2, 3, 4th on the overall wicket taker charts. He's chipping away there, an older fella among a pretty young Auckland Aces team as well, isn't he?
Yeah, and you'd also expect that from someone who has been bowling in Australia and first-class cricket in Australia coming into New Zealand first-class cricket. You would expect someone who has shown that they can perform at that level to perform pretty well in New Zealand, just like Devon Conway. Like, if we know, like, if you're averaging 40 in South Africa, you're doing bloody well. If you're the like, he wasn't always the number one spinner for New South Wales, but if you're good enough to be the spinner for New South Wales in Sheffield Shield, I think it is, you're doing bloody well, and you're probably going to perform pretty well in New Zealand as well. So it's going to be a long road back to the Black Caps for Will Somerville if he ever gets there. But bowling well this summer in Plunket Shield, followed up by another beautiful summer next summer, will put him in a good stead, wildcard.
Yep, that's the one. Is there any other Plunket Shield narratives, ideas, characters that you wanted to get to?
Not at all, mate. I think we've explored.
Might have to call it a day
explored
then.
many nooks and crannies in there, and we will wrap it up. We will hopefully come back early next week with a bit of a look at the Kiwi footballing landscape. We've got the final of the Premiership in New Zealand wildcard happening on Sunday.
That is the one. North Harbour Stadium, Eastern Suburbs against Team Wellington. Massive upset in the semi-final as Team Wellington went up to Kiwitea Street and knocked out Auckland City, who had been undefeated with a record points total up until that point. So big drama there. Expecting a pretty entertaining grand final as well on Sunday from those lot. I might have to make a trek down and watch it.
So we'll be touching base with the Premiership and maybe a few other Kiwi footballing matters. Got the Football Ferns.
Oh yes, big World Cup here.
Yeah, World Cup coming up, and flying Kiwis all over the world doing the thing, ripping Aotearoa as we do here at the Niche Cache. Enjoy. Jump on Patreon. Support the Niche Cache. Tell a friend. Talofa.